Hello, everyone. Welcome to IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Joel Ward, and with me is Nick Mann. How are you doing, Nick?
Hey, thank you for having me, Joel. I'm doing great.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, Nick, I actually went on your show not that long ago, and I'm glad we finally got to connect and have you on my show. So, Nick, would you give my listeners a little overview of yourself? Just what got you into the podcasting space? What kind of stuff you do in work wise, and just we'll go from there.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I had you on the Don't Quit podcast. That is my podcast that I've been doing for about 6 years. A lot of those many years, it started as a solo show of my ability to improve myself through my motivation and productivity. And I would just be sharing what I've learned and techniques I was doing to share to anyone who listened. And I didn't even care about promoting the show. It was just me, myself, and I about just sharing it out to the world and trying to improve myself. As luck would have it, people would find my show. I'm not even 100% sure how. And I was starting getting a listener base. And it just continued to grow from there till the pandemic happened. And unfortunately, I'm just like remote only for like everything. So like my contacts and meeting people pretty much went out the window. So that's when I decided to have guests on. It was such a pivotal moment in my podcasting career because I had all these mental blocks of the worst case scenarios of having guests on. And I was as good at making excuses for not having it until I decided, it's about time I did. And it was like one of the most life-changing moments ever because now I have such big stories that are all constantly being shared, and the platform is now feels like it's been bigger than myself. So that's just essentially how I came to from my podcasting career to this day.
Awesome. And it's kind of, it's kind of how mine was is like I started out as a solo show and people started
Mhm.
listening and it was just me talking about tech. And I remember getting my first guest on and I talked about this yesterday with someone. I got my first guest on and I remember just that feeling of like, wow, people are listening to and it had 1.1 thousand views right off the bat. And I remember listening to that, like I was like hearing the responses from that. And I was like, wow, like that's awesome and like I want more of that. And so I started like I cold email a lot of people and reach out to people, celebrities, all this stuff, YouTubers, influencers, millionaires, daily, to go on my show. And then I reach out to local people and I reach out to like just people on LinkedIn and I just hear people on other shows and then I'll reach out to them through that hearing them on other shows. And that's how I've been doing things. It's kind of like, when I started out solo, and I think you can relate to this. When I started out solo, it was great. It helped my confidence. But when I got my first guest, man, this like the feeling was just great. And I don't know how it was for you, but what was it like when you got your very first guest? What was for you? What was it like to get your very first guest on?
It was a very I tried to make the transition as easy as possible by getting my friends on first, who were also podcasters. So I was able to get in the hang of it on the fly really quickly with them because they are just so much more experienced and attuned with it. So I was able to get my necessary skills to build myself up from there.
Yeah, and I didn't do that. I just jumped right into it. I
Jump
just was
right
like,
in.
get your first. I got my very first guest, and she was actually an influencer and model, plus size model on Instagram, and we actually became good friends. Um, After that, she ended up writing a book with me, and I have two books published. I talked about on your show. I have two books published. One of them was what she wrote with me and told her story about what got her into the stuff she does. And I remember just a feeling of accomplishment. And then I got my next guest and my next guest. And actually, the one guest I got on connected me with some bigger guests who connected me with some bigger guests who connected who just it's just a downroll like you work so hard on the cold emails and you reach out to certain people and then you ask them, hey, do you know anybody else who wants to go on the show? And then they send you those people and then they send you those people. And then when you start researching people and what I do a lot, and I don't know if this is what you do, I do a lot of research. I basically stalk through people's profiles on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and then I reach out to them and I say, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for the show. I think you bring a charisma, you bring a great story, and that's why I like. And I think that's what you do is I like the stories. I like sharing people's testimonies. So Nick, what what really makes podcasting fun for you? Like, what do you like about what for me it was just getting my voice heard, sharing stories. What was it for you that really made you want to get into podcasting?
It was honestly my self reflection of improvement. I think that's what keeps me going and how much I like to challenge myself. Because even right now, I'm going back to also doing solo shows, but there's no script, and I try to do it in all in one take. So I'm always trying to push myself and my own comfortability as a podcaster. And this all about the self improvement. That's where I really care about so much. I know there's a lot of people who care about the numbers. They care about the control of the show. They care about building an audience. But I do it for about I just do it for the self improvement and just being able to put out my best self every time. So that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, and I like that. I like so basically just being vulnerable and open with people and sharing your story and testimony while they're sharing theirs.
Yes, absolutely. Because some people are sharing things that they've never shared with other people before. I mean, there's some very hard, like very deep and dark topics that I never thought anyone would want to talk about that with me and being as a complete stranger. And so, like, there's a lot of bearing their souls they put out to me, and it's this like incredible experience that I never thought that I would be in. And it's also very just humbling. It's very it's I know it's actually put a lot hard to put into words just how much I feel about that because it's like a lot of times like how do you say when someone's going through a very dark situation in their life, like what do you say to that?
What I would I don't really deal with that on my show so much, but there's times
Yeah.
in tech where I'm like I talk about with tech people and they're like I dealt with this situation recently where I was talking about we had a issue and we were on the show and the show got erased off my computer and I had to redo the show and I reached out and I was like, "Look, I am so sorry. But I need to reschedule the show. I lost the recording." And I remember the guest was so gracious. His name was Edwin. And he was so gracious, so kind. And he was like, yes, let's re-record, let's set it up. We re-recorded that next week and had it up and running. And I got to show up and it was just nice. And he understood because as a data recovery specialist, he understood what needs to happen in that situation. Um, and I know the hard questions I like to ask are, um, what really is something that made you want to do what you want to do? And a lot of the times the guests, they come back and they're like, well, what really got me in this space was, oh, I lost my job, or I really, when they're in entrepreneurship or doing their own small business, it's like I lost my job, or oh, this hit me hard, and like I just decided I wanted to jump in and do something. And a lot of times it's like it's great, like the content is great, they're sharing their story is great, and I actually have some cool guests coming on here soon. Cass Card, she is a I want to say she's like a makeup tutorial kind of person, but she does it full time just hearing, I want to hear, I've reached out to her and we kind of got a background on her and just hearing her story and testimony. I was like, you need to be on my show. You need to be on my show because you have something about you that is like it's something that people need to hear. And I actually was really excited when I got her on the show. She's gonna be on here in the next few weeks, I think. Actually, maybe next week. And I've had a lot of people on the show who just share their testimonies and share their pains and struggles of what got them started into entrepreneurship and or podcasting or influencing or YouTube. And it's all everybody has a story to share, and I like being able to tell that story with them.
Oh, absolutely. Because like in order to be in these kind of entrepreneurial type content creators, there definitely is a level of creativity and ingenious ability to create something out of nothing. And I think there's always just something fascinating that they have always shared about now, like they're very passionate and now they're sharing it to the world. I think there's something that's always so magical and worth listening to.
Yeah, and I don't know if this goes for you, but the guests I get on, like they're excited to share their story. They're excited. Some of them have
Mhm.
never been on a podcast before, and so they're like, oh, like they'll say back to me like, oh my goodness, like I've never been on a show. I've wanted to go on a show. I'm like, thank you for the opportunity. And then I get them on, and they're like so excited, and then they're so excited to share with their followers and their friends about like they were on a show and they got heard. I remember Cass said she cried when she was asked to go on the show. Um, because she said it was so moving that I would humble her and offering her the position on my show. And I remember Tiffany Hanner, who I'm good friends with now. Um, she wrote the two of my books with me. She when I asked her to go on the show, she was so excited. And I remember when, after we got to know each other a little bit longer, and then she had been on my show and stuff, I had actually asked her, because of her heart and who she was, I was like, would you love to write a book with me? And she wrote the first book. And then we collaborated on a second book. But I remember before we went to the second book, I remember she was so ecstatic and people were buying the book and she was getting her story heard. And I remember she said to me, she said, one of the things it's so incredible is like people are walking up to me in the store and saying, are you Tiffany Hanna? Are you the one that wrote the book with Joel Ward? And she published a second book with me, and it just got so much respect and love from the community. And it was just, I've connected with so many people on my show and been able to share testimonies and stories, and then stay with and then keep them as like contacts, and like talk to them and share their testimony with other people through the social platforms. Um, that's one of the questions I want to ask you is when you get guests on, how do you, this is for people who don't know podcasting or who have never done it, how do you get your guests? Do you, like you said, you did friends and family kind of thing who do podcasting? How do you get your other guests on? Who do you reach out to? Where do you find these guests?
Oh man, there's multiple ways, and I don't do just only one. Of course, the number one biggest, of course, is what you said, is referrals. It is the easiest and biggest way to get anyone, because it's easy to get like an email from some Joe, but when you get it from a friend saying, "Hey, I had a really awesome episode with this guy. You need to be on here," like it means, I would say, probably 10 times more value than just a single cold email. Another one is, of course, is LinkedIn groups. That's very useful for me, and it's where a lot of like-minded people are able to share and promote their work. Most of the people who are most fascinated and interested in my show are the type of coaches where it's like a life coach, a business coach, very niche coaches, or also authors. They are always they always have so much speaking experience. So that's why I rarely have someone that actually has never been on a show before or has never had experience to talk to an audience. A lot of my guests actually have a lot of experience in that. So that's why I'm also very thankful, because they sound amazing, and I think they put me to shame a little bit, or it makes me want to improve, I would say, because they're able to say things with such confidence, such flow, and they can be able to say so much, but be so entertaining and energetic throughout it. So it definitely inspires me to have guests like that on. Let's see. Another one is, there's a lot of just podcasting guest referral groups out there too that are also very useful. They're also just the same way as having guest referrals. So yeah, I would say number one is definitely referrals.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, one of the things I use is I use different platforms like you. I use Matchmaker. I just use so many different ways to connect to people. It's insane how you can connect to people. And I'm trying to say, it's how you can connect to people. Like, and before the pandemic, and this is one of the things I want to touch on, is before the pandemic, we never knew we could connect over so many different platforms and so easily over different like countries and continents and stuff, and be able to connect with someone and do a show with them. And it's just so fascinating. And it's insane how we were able to start up podcasts. There's like, I think during the pandemic, there were so many new podcasts starting up just because of people working from home and had the time to discuss and do things. It's been great. So yeah, so one of the things is like, I will say to people starting out is like, make sure you have an idea of what you're doing for your show, and then stick with it. And if you're going to get guests, make sure you write a pitch. And I don't know if you do this, but I write a pitch of what I'm going to say to people for the show. Like, hey, I want you on the show for this, or how I want your specific talent and stuff for the show. I don't know if you do that, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I like to give some kind of guidance on like anything specific, especially when I have guests that are very well rounded in a lot of different areas. That's kind of like with life coaches. They're very good about so many parts of life, and it's can be overwhelming to talk about so much of it. So I kind of like to pick like one aspect where it's like relationships, career, motivation, habits, time, energy. I like to try to choose one of those areas and then kind of expand and maybe jump a little bit into something else if given enough time. So that's kind of what I like to feel for it. But a lot of times I kind of like to see where their open-ended questions go and see like what drives them the most based on their answers too.
Yeah, and one of the things I can attest to is the referral thing that you were saying. I have had
Mhm.
referrals, and that is the most, it really makes you feel good because someone said, "Hey, I had a good time on the show. I want you to go to the show. You need to go on the show," and that's great. Um, so back to one of the questions I want to ask is when you do podcasting, and when you first started out, how did you start out? Did you start with all the equipment, or because see, for me, I start with just my phone. And there's a lot of people who just are like, well, I need all this equipment to start. I can't start without the equipment. You don't need the equipment. You can start with just your phone. But how long did it take you to get yourself finally to the point where the show is going to be the best?
I also started recording right on my phone, the voice recording app on the iPhone, just right in my my bedroom. That's how it first started for quite a few episodes. I don't remember how soon I got my first microphone, then recording it through my computer. I believe it was at least 30, 40 episodes in, probably more if I had to think about it. And that was also because I'm very self-conscious about audio quality. Because if anyone who says like what's their number one issue with podcasting or what they like and dislike is the audio quality is the make or break it. Everything else is like can be okay or passable, but the audio quality is like something that no one wants to like negotiate on. It has to be as good as possible.
Yeah, I was not. When I first started, I used a webcam mic and it was awful. And I was like, I hate the sound of this. And I was like, I need a pop filter. I need
Yeah.
all this. And I ended up getting a $60 mic and was able to just
Mhm.
use the pop filter that came with the pop filter, and it would sound so much better. And now I don't make the show 100% perfect, but I do try and make the sound quality perfect for my listeners. And that's one of the things I do. I can attest that, like, making the sound quality, making everything great, making sure the audio file and even the video file sounds good and looks good. So yeah, it's I can understand that. What what are three things you would give an up and coming podcaster, like someone who wanted to get into podcasting? What was advice you would give them to get started?
Before I answer that question, that reminds me of my first pop filter. I made it myself. I got a clothes hanger and a sock, and I was able to shimmy it and then wrap it around the microphone at the bottom and hold it in place. So that was my first ever pop filter.
That is actually really cool that you Jimmy rigged your own pop filter.
Yeah, so to answer your question, man, the best advice I have is it for people who want to be podcasters.
Yes, yes. So people
Okay.
who are thinking about doing podcasting still, and like are like, hey, I want to do this, and I listened to this
Oh
episode. What
man.
what what would you give them? Like, as since you were an up when you were an up and coming, what was something you would give yourself back then to get yourself started?
Well, I would say is every excuse that you have that makes you want to quit or doesn't make you want to start is all in your head, and there's no one else that's actually telling you can't do this. That's gonna be my number one. But also second is the expectations. Don't expect money, don't expect fame, don't expect tons of listeners. A lot of people get burned out from that aspect because it doesn't come at the speed they want it to, and then they end up quitting. That's what I'd say is you got to power through it. You have to enjoy the process because all the people who have made it and done great, they probably have gone months and months and months, if not years, like I have, where they just had only a few listeners and they were just still powering through because that was they enjoyed the process. So that's kind of what my second best advice for that.
Awesome. No, that's great. I see. One of the things that like really deterred me was I was like, is anybody gonna listen to my show? Are people gonna even like the show? Like, am I going to be good at doing this? And it was just one of those things. It's just like, I just I got so upset, and I just like, I'm not gonna do this because I don't want to do it. I remember the one guy, Nick Nallback, talked me into it. He was like, dude, just do it. He's like, you might fail, but he's like, you're gonna find out that in the end it's gonna be worth it. So I remember getting on the show the very first time and doing it and upload the episode, and it was crap. It was crap. And I remember when I got my first guest and the show became more refined, and even now I'm still refining the show even better. And I'm getting more and more responses and people saying, hey, this is great now, like I'm enjoying your show, I want you to keep doing it, keep putting more episodes out. And I get the responses like, I really enjoyed that episode, or but before it was like, when people listen to the show, I was like, like I have this many listeners now, and like, what am I gonna do with, like, I need to pump out more content, I need to find things that are good. And it was just all like, it was just really like tough. And even now it's like a full-time job, because like I have to edit and I have to do all this stuff and I have to find guests and daily finding guests, and it's just so much work. But yeah, I love doing it. I love podcasting. Podcasting to me is it's very therapeutic, and I just love doing it. So we have 8 minutes left on the show. I would like to, real quick before we have to end here, um so one of the things I like to ask guests, and I think I've already kind of asked this, is what is something, uh, for you, it would be, what is something that advice you could give someone? And we kind of already touched this, but what advice you could give someone, like, like you already kind of said, keep going, don't give up. But what is some advice you could give someone that would help them in their current situation? Like, say they're like just struggling, like, you said you have a lot of life coaches on. What is something they're struggling to, get through the day or get through the year with, like, hey, I don't know what I'm gonna do at work. What was some advice you could give someone to keep going? Like, what's the best advice you have for someone in that situation?
Yeah, I ask this question a lot to my guests because they have a lot of hands-on experience with these types of people. And the best way I could say is that at the end of the day, you always need to be believing yourself. You need to be your number one fan. You need to be the one that shows up. And I think a lot of problems happens is because they're putting too much energy, time into other people to either do it for them or put too much hope in something that may not actually pan out and not believing in themselves. I think that's got to be your first one. You have to really find out who yourself is and the passion that what is it that you want to do. And a lot of times there are people who struggle with that. There's a lot of people who struggle getting out of bed, finding going to the shower, eating. And I know it could be a struggle for those types of people, but they need to know that there's a lot of people who can do it, and so can you, because you're no one is actually that much greater than you. They just make different choices. So that's what I would definitely say is you have to believe in yourself first and foremost.
Well, awesome, awesome. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you. I really look forward to having my episode air and sharing that with my followers. And definitely, if I have any guests, I have a couple life coaches that have asked to go on my show. Maybe I'll have to send them your way. That way you can do them, because it's not all. I have so many life coaches asking me, and I don't really do that many. I've had like 3 or 4 on before, but I get a lot of those daily. So maybe I'll have to send some your way so you can get some more guests. But yeah, referrals, Nick. Referrals is a good way. I do like that. Referrals is a good one. But yeah, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel. It's wonderful.
Yeah. For everyone out there, please stay tuned. There's a lot of big guests coming on here soon. So please stay tuned. There's a lot of scheduling and stuff going on in the background, but I really appreciate those who tune in, those who support the show. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.